help me welcome back to the stage Lucy Liu and Lawrence Shou. I feel like everyone should take a breath because it's such an intense experience, and I feel like sort of sitting in the feeling that we have at the end of the film, maybe starting from that, which is it's an unusual film in the sense that most people will go into it knowing where the story might end, which I think is sometimes a challenge in telling a story, which we think it might end up here. How did you approach, and maybe Lucy, I'll start with you, how did you think about, if everyone knows this is where it's going to end, how do I find my entry point and to bring this audience on for such a difficult journey?
I think that this story is, I guess, something that is important because it's part of our community. And I think if anyone even knows the ending of this story, because it's based on a true story, obviously, it is kind of there's more questions than answers. And I wonder if anyone or everyone knew where it was going, if you'd want to see why that happened. And I think that's the things that we need to ask ourselves as human beings, is why did this family fall into this place, and why did she do this, and how? And I think that, I mean, our journey, I think, as a people and as a team trying to bring this, is really to bring authenticity to this woman and this son, and to show that it is a story of love. And I think that that's the one thing we can all understand. We might take away from it, you know, in a way that is, like, you might have an individual experience as to, you know, what you think, like, she should have done it, that was crazy, that was not okay, that was what was okay. I mean, it's going to spark conversation, and I think the importance of this movie is that it's made for our community, and it resonates beyond that. It's a universal story, and it talks about marginalization, it talks about the healthcare system, you know, the lack of advocacy that she had, and, you know, the loneliness that she must have felt at that point.
It's tremendous. I think that part of the exercise, at least for me as an audience, is to not judge what's happening and not to judge the people making decisions that they're making, because it's human. When you're in the middle of something complicated, it's hard to make judgment calls. But going to your point, you know, Lucy, that you're talking about, the experience of watching the film, it's so isolating. It feels like Irene is incredibly isolated. It feels like Joe is incredibly isolated. And so I think, Lawrence, for you, as you think about this character, what for you drew you to want to immerse yourself in that? Or what was the thing that you sort of felt most drawn to in terms of playing this role? And I think I said this at the top, this is Lawrence's first film and first real acting job. And his mom is here. So what pulled you to this? What resonated for you when you felt like this is something I understand, I think, my way in to be Joe?
Absolutely. You know, there are so many things about this story and about Joe that is completely relatable to me, and I think to so many people in the audience, in around the world, you know, because Joe, at the center of it, you know, we might be watching a movie right now, we might be watching a character, but at the core of it, Joe was a real person. You know, he was a young boy who was a student, a son, a friend, He was so many things. And myself, being a young man who grew up within the Asian community, who grew up with immigrant parents, who grew up going to school where I experienced shame and isolation, I think there were so many things that I related to, and so many things that I experienced. Obviously not to the extent, and obviously my story is different, but there were elements that were at the core of who I am that I think were also at the core of who Joe was, and I think I brought that when I was developing this character. I had a great community behind me. I had Lucy supporting me. I had Eric, our fantastic director, who worked on this character with me. And when we started developing Joe, that was where we started. We started with Joe as a human being, as, like I said earlier, student, a son, a friend, and we kind of built off of that. And I think it really humanizes and makes him relatable to people around the world, which is ultimately what we want, because we want people to see this movie and see Joe and see the characters in this film in the community and the people around them. Because there are people like that who are struggling every day.
And it does, it feels like, I think there's the thing that's sort of interesting about this, I had read this as an early script a few times, and I think the thing that was interesting both in the script as it evolved, but into the final film, is that we're already at a crisis when the movie starts. There's already a level of sort of loss of control or loss of medication, in a way that we're seeing this roller coaster kind of go down quickly and going to hit in this place. And I think that one of the things that I think about in terms of how you bring yourselves to it, but what is it that you ultimately want us to feel as we come away, is that it is a devastating place that we ultimately go to. And also, as I was in the audience at the end of this, it was so still in here. It was so, everyone, which is why I asked everyone to take a breath. I really did feel like everyone was holding their breath and caring about these characters so much. So speaking to, what you were saying about, it's relatable. I want to go a little bit, Lawrence, you mentioned the word shame. And I want to think a little bit about, there's a moment in the film when Lucy, your character, Irene, is with her friend. And her friend, boy, I can't remember exactly the quote, but talks about seeing a therapist and it's dismissed, right? Like there's an embarrassment. And can you speak a little bit to the idea of, I think in many cultures, but particularly in Asian American cultures, Chinese American culture, you protect and you take care of things within your own world. You don't expose and you don't show vulnerability. Is that something you felt you could relate to and you understood this is how Irene is operating in her environment and in her world?
I think there's a lot of stigma connected to any kind of state outside of being at your very best. Everyone is always going on about, how they're in the honor roll, or they just won the piano competition, and they just want to see everyone at their height, but they never really want to see the fall. And there's a fascination with the fall. We've all seen, celebrities or people
within our culture of seeing that.
Yeah, just in the world, especially in the United States, there's this culture of watching people fall, like building them up, like Britney Spears, and then watching them fall, and then, there's this kind of feeling of sensationalism and this almost a titillation. And I think that, it's easier to talk about somebody and their condition, like, when they went to the party and the friends were like, I hear he's taking medicine, it's going to permanently damage his brain, and, it's like when you talk about somebody, would you want to hear those words about yourself? You really have to often think about that. And when her friend says to her, you sound like a foreigner.
Yes.
So within her own social community, they're judging her. And then even her very close friend is saying, like, you're not one of us. Like, why are you doing that? And meanwhile, this is a mother that is trying to do what the school is telling her to do. She's bringing him to a therapist. The therapist is asking her to go into the room even though she's uncomfortable. She's giving him Western medicine, which is, just another, idea of what she's against or what the community's against and what she probably believes as well. But she wants to do everything she can to cure him. And I don't think she knows that there's no cure. This is a diagnosis, this is a living, breathing thing that is happening every moment.
Constant thing to be managed, yes.
And then even at the end, she calls the police. I mean, she's doing all the right things. And it's just what to me, that's just heartbreaking that she is, unable to get a grasp even though she's following all the rules. And I think that she just keeps sliding further and further down. And I mean, I think my goal is really to see this woman and to give her the compassion and the love that she deserved and that she didn't have, and that, that she doesn't just become a headline.
Right, that we see her. It's interesting, and in the end, if people saw, this was a 2017 article in the LA Times, and it had quite a sensational title, right? I think again, my memory's failing me, but like a mother, a gun.
Dying mother's wish, it just...
And it grabs your attention, but it immediately tells you...
Shoot your son, like it's like a list, like an agenda.
And it's a very sensational way of looking at it. And so to me, being in this film is about stripping that away and understanding who what struggle, looks like. I think a little bit on a performance level, Lucy, I feel like a lot of us know you through your work as someone, or where you play characters that have very quick language, very just sharp and fast. And the thing that was so interesting for me to experience with this film, it was the first time, and you may have played this before, but I hadn't seen it. First of all, it's a beautiful lead role, and I don't know why we haven't been able to see you in that before. So feeling very grateful to have seen you play this role. But you are physically, I think, quite transformed. You are moving in a way that is different. For those of you who live in households with slippers, you walk differently with slippers. It's not a graceful movement, and that made me feel very much that I understood that household. But I also think about the barriers that Irene had. There's language, there's culture, there are all of these different things that are creating hurdles for her to both, I think, try to comprehend what is the right thing to do for her son. And also, it's hard to take all that information in because the way in which information is being given to her is sort of like partial. The therapist has one thing to say, the school and the police have another thing to say. I'm curious for you, sorry, I'm trying to go back to sort of your transformation. I'm wondering about the film and sort of the fact that this physically feels like such a different role for you. Did you view it that way in terms of how you needed to embody her and how she spoke and how the way in which she interacted with the world was very different than what we have seen you do before in your work?
Yes, it is very different. But this is my first lead role in my over 30-year career.
I think that deserves some applause.
This is my first chance to show you, what I can really do. And that's, I didn't get into the business to be a martial artist. I never even had a gym membership. So
You do it very well, though.
Apparently, when you do something well, they just want to keep you in the well. It's really, to me, art is about expression, and it is about the ability to connect when you create any piece of art, whatever it is. And so, when I began in the business in the 90s, there was very little opportunity. And so the roles that I would go up for had they always had this word like exotic, so that's the roles that I could go and be seen for. I didn't even know what it meant. Actually, I remember saying to my manager, like, I don't even understand what is exotic, you know? I'm not going in there with a, you know, I'm just looking like myself. I wake up and this is it. But I realized that to them, if it doesn't look like what, you know, Americana is, that's what's exotic.
Or the fact that they literally are not casting anybody else who might not be exactly what everyone is used to, and that for them is exotic, but it's not exotic if you live in it.
And everyone in the room looked different, you know, from what we've seen growing up, you know, not for you guys, but for me. And so that's why Charlie's Angels was such a big deal, because it was an Americana like vision, right? It's a vision of what they think it is. So for me, I think my only job was to do something that would, I mean, whether the movie succeeded or not, was to bring the vision of something different into, I guess, to make it ubiquitous. And not to really talk too much about it, but just be. And so I think most of what I've been trying to do is to just normalize, you know, what diversity is, which is just what the world is, what we reflect. And so I really believe that Irene is also something that has been reflected in my life since I grew up. And to have the opportunity to I guess, make her something, humanize her in a way that is relatable to me, was my only job, to really bring her to life and to also bring my heritage and my culture and I guess dimensionalize something that I, you know, have always wanted to do, which is any character that you give me. I will try to make that person special because that's my job. That's what I want to do. If I'm given a script or a role and I don't think I can do it, then I, you know, make it special or make it sing, then I won't. You know, I mean, some of it, you know, falls on its face, some of it doesn't, but you just do the best you can. And I think for me, this is the most personal role that I've ever done.
It was incredibly dimensionalized. Beautiful, beautiful work. I want to speak a little bit to the fact that you were also a producer on this film. So my understanding is there was an article written in 2017. Andrew, a couple of the producers got the rights to it and started assembling the team. And you came on at fairly early on in the process to do this film and to come on as a producer. And I'm curious for you as someone with, at this moment, 30 years of industry and more to come, but that's a huge amount of experience. And with the producers that were on this film, with Eric, this is a first time directing for him. He was accomplished as a cinematographer, and I was aware of him as a cinematographer. Lawrence, first role, you, to me, really represented such a key part of the film being able to be made. And I think to not only take on the lead role, but to be the producer, and not like a producer in name, like a producer rolling up your sleeves. And I'm curious for you, what were the hurdles maybe that you didn't expect in trying to get this movie off the ground?
Okay guys, what weren't the hurdles? Literally, like, you know, it was so crazy because coming on you thought, well, it's a small movie, we can get this done. I mean, nobody wanted to give money. You know, we had to get 16 different investors to, you know, put money into this movie, and I was like, wow. It was all about the community also. The community put their money in, because I think most times, and I think everyone feels this way, like if you're gonna put money in, you're hoping you're gonna make it back. Or like at least break even, and I don't know that it's gonna happen necessarily. I hope it does, but they realized there was an impact behind it, and I think what I've found out the hard way was that our stories just don't seem to be as important. And I thought they were, but I guess if you're not kicking ass, you're not kicking ass. So like the box office is what they want, you know, and like I think there's a vacancy for space for stories, and I think we've talked about, you know, how storytelling is like the first form of entertainment, right, in the world.
Yeah.
And it started in tribes and villages, and you know, they didn't have all these special effects and all these wire work movies that were out that are so entertaining and so wonderful, and I enjoy very much. And so we just don't want to lose a sense of, you know, where we come from and where we can go. And where we can go in this particular movie is to see this family and to see the people around you. Yesterday there was a screening in Los Angeles, and I was so surprised to see a 12-year-old at the screening. I turned and there was like a little girl there, and I thought, maybe she just looks really young, I don't know. So I asked her, like, how old are you? And she's like, and she had this tiny little voice. She said she was 12. And I said, how do you feel? And she said, I feel sad, but I'm really happy I saw it. And then the person standing next to her was the father, and I asked him, like, hey, are you sure? Like, why did you bring your 12-year-old to this movie? I was so shocked. I have a 10-year-old, guys. So I was like, my son is never going to see this movie. Let's be honest. And so, you know what? But this is the kicker. He said, I'm so happy that she saw this movie because we have a neighbor that is schizophrenic, their son, and we hear like screaming, and we hear like a lot of, he had an accent, like a lot of destruction and, you know, crashing sounds. And now she can see why it's happening and understand from a different point of view, like to have empathy, but not because you're the neighbor and like what's going on, it's so scary. It's a way to sort of see something from a different place. And I learned something so big in that moment. Like, he was willing to, I guess, traumatize his daughter to a degree in order to show her, like, hey, there's something going on there that we don't know about, but now we know, and now we can see somebody differently. And that's what we're hoping for, that people see people differently and see themselves differently.
Well, and that when you are watching something up there, you also can have a little bit of distance to sort of learn and feel something and develop the empathy, right? Which is to understand that things that seem scary or alien actually are not. And how can you be empowered? I do think 12. What a brave, smart girl she is. We have time for a couple of questions, if that is okay with you. I don't know if the house lights can come up, but if you have a question, I'm going to end up repeating them. So, oh my goodness, no one has questions.
No, it's right there.
Right here?
Back there, just on the aisle.
Oh, okay, there's no microphone. Okay, yes, so thank you for this movie, and thank you for these wonderful performances, especially Lawrence, well, both of you, but Lawrence, I think that was a tremendous way you got into this character, and so that's part of my question. But first of all, I saw Lawrence, his problem is schizophrenia, but it's really a deep crisis in disconnection and isolation, which they both have isolation from the community. And suffering is a crisis in connection. The opposite of suffering is belonging. So I hope that the movie brings greater belonging to people with mental health problems, because I think there's probably no one, I would be surprised if anyone in this room has not been directly impacted by mental illness or directly impacted by gun violence. But my question is, how did you research the illness of schizophrenia? How did you learn about it, and what informed you?
So the question is for Lawrence, which is, how did you research schizophrenia? What was your process to understand it?
Yeah, first of all, I just want to thank you for your statement. I think that's so true. You know, belonging is something that everyone needs, and without it, we suffer. And a lot of times we suffer alone, and that's what leads to tragedies like this one. To answer your question, as for the research, you know, after I came onto the project, I spent a little less than a month with our director, Eric, and we just spent every day doing everything we could researching schizophrenia, researching the character, the person Joe, because we wanted to honor the memory of not just this person, but also every person who has struggled with schizophrenia, because it is something that so many people deal with. And so we really took our time. You know, we interviewed doctors, we interviewed psychiatrists, we watched documentaries. It's really interesting. You know, these days you can find on YouTube, you can find people who will document their own experiences. with schizophrenia. You'll film their episodes, they'll talk through it. And it's really interesting because, you know, schizophrenia is something that is unique to every person. It's not one set of symptoms, it's not one single thing, it doesn't look like one certain way. And so a big part of that research was also finding what would be relevant to Joe, not just finding out, you know, what schizophrenia, you know, what the movements are, what the actions are. No, it was also finding out what would be personal to this person. And so I give so much credit to Eric because he was so patient with me, and he, you know, was there with me through every interview, every single page, every single sentence we read, every single video we watched, you know, and we really just took that time. You know, it was very brutal, but also very educating and very rewarding for myself, because I learned things about schizophrenia, about mental health I didn't know. And that's kind of what I hope this movie will do for all of you and everybody who watches this movie, is that there's an education involved, because that's what kind of helped me.
Yeah, creating a path for better understanding. Another question. I can't, my eyes are terrible. Right here, white hat.
First off, I want to say thank you for making this film. My brother has schizophrenia, and he's over 18, and it's been challenging. And so, Lucy, my question to you, as I was watching this film, I was thinking about my mother and how she moved through those episodes, and you being a mother yourself. I'm wondering how did you get into character for those moments? Were there any therapy sessions that you needed to separate the character after the fact? And then moving forward with the character, knowing the entity, were there just any behaviors that you explored with that character to see how far you could go as an actress, especially this being your first role? Because I loved it, and so annoyed that it's been 30 years and we haven't had the opportunity to see this level of expression in your acting.
So a question about Lucy's process in terms of inhabiting the role, and also whether or not you had done research with therapists, or the process to understand the character and the character's relationship to Joe.
Thank you, and I can say the whole Rosemead team is with you. We feel you. You know, this is a movie that is supposed to be felt, and I think for me, I mean, as a mother, I did not connect myself as a mother as much as I connected myself as a child. And I say that because as a child, I witnessed my parents going through life trying to express themselves, and I could see how they talked and were able to speak fluently at home in Mandarin Chinese, but when they were outside of the house, they were trying to fragment together their form of expression. So in a way, I went back in time to connect, and that was I think, what tethered me to this character. I think if I don't know that I could have, you know, brought myself present day to her, because it would have been, I don't know, it just never occurred to me because it would have been too obvious. And I think there was a lot of, I guess, there had to be almost this feeling that she was transplanted into this place, and that feeling of being disjointed had to really fall into the, I guess, the pace and the urgency of what was also happening as time went on, like when he disappeared and then she found him, and then the police story. I mean, all of those things she started to puzzle together something that was very different than what was happening. But there was something real happening too, you know? I just wanted to really bring that heritage to my role, and to really get there and to, you know, to really tell you what it was it started with the language. Like all of the dialogue, all of it was broken down. I went through every single sentence and then made it my own, and then, because when you get a script and it's like, it's italicized, basically saying that's in Mandarin, or that's in, you know, English, you know, if I say that I'm going to get a burger, it's not gonna be the same thing, like if I say it in an accent. It's not how she would say it. She wouldn't conjugate the verb, she would mix the, you know, the words together or differently, and I think that's the tenderness of her character was important. And I think when the audience hears her, it's very important that they feel her too.
There's something I think that also happens for first generation families where you are speaking a mix. It's Chinglish, or pick your other language, right? And so seeing parents do that with their children, because the children are going to dominate in English, but it's going to be that back and forth, and that tenderness is really evident, I think, between your two characters. I'm curious for the film. It doesn't have a giant engine like a Netflix, and so the film is going to be released in New York and in LA in December 5th, I think. What is the thing that we would want to ask of this audience in terms of going and advocating and encouraging people to see the film when it does become available more widely, and that you hope that they can take out into the world in terms of opening themselves up to this story, and what you would want them to see them do?
I think it's all just about community. I think it's about showing up for each other, showing up for your community, and that's what this movie kind of is. You know, we are creating community here. This movie was created by our community, and now we're making it for our community. And so, first of all, I just want to thank you all for showing up today, because just showing up to these screenings, you know, that by itself is support and showing up for your community. And so that's my biggest takeaway, I think, is just that when the movie comes out, you know, we have a short week in New York and LA where we're going to screen in December, and you know, just I encourage you to spread the word if you feel like this movie touched you, or it can touch you know, someone in your life, someone that can gain value from it. I just encourage you to spread it, because I think that's what this is. You know, it's a grassroots movement, and it starts with us.
Yes, we only have, I'm going to talk as a producer now, but we have 1 week in New York and 1 week in LA. That is our window. And so we feel honored that we even get to share it here and there. It's hard because when you don't have money, you can't, you know, really show what you want people that are not like on the East and West Coast to be able to see it, people that are actually, you know, in the middle, that are probably suffering the most, you know, because they don't have access or community, or, you know, I guess different ways to. We have the culture here, you know, on the East and West Coast. That's what it is, and we have these film festivals, and we have these I guess these ways forward. Like you're championing the movie. I think that I don't know a lot about what's going on in social media, but if there's something called Letterbox, if there's something, I mean, I don't know, guys, help me out.
All the people in this audience who are great social media people, please go out.
We'll just talk about the
post.
movie,
Yes.
and just encourage people to see it. I don't know if it's gonna make it to streaming, but it's made it here, and that's almost enough. So thank you for showing up.
The last favor I have before I thank Lucy and Lawrence is, I have a favor for this audience, which is we have to get Lucy to her flight on time. And so I'm going to ask everybody to be their best selves and sit on their hands and just wait in the audience so that we can get her out the door. She's been really, both of you have been so generous to give us so much time this evening and during this Q&A. I know I took a few extra minutes. So I'm going to ask that favor, but I also want everyone to please help me thank Lucy and Lawrence for the beautiful, beautiful work that they did. And to thank this audience, thank you so much for being here and for experiencing this together. And we wish you well with the movie, and we are going to talk a lot about it.
Thank you, everybody.